As more and more people work from home, companies have access to global talent. So now you are not just competing with who's in your city, you're competing with who's around the world. You need to be one of the best in your craft. If other people are out beating you at what you traditionally did for a job, you're not gonna have a job. What that tends to, I guess, start pushing people towards is, well, I don't really like what I've been doing for a living for so long. Why don't I start like actually looking into the things I actually enjoy and maybe I'll actually get good at it. And at that point you start thinking about more like, oh wow, work doesn't feel like a burden anymore. Now this work-life integration makes sense because work is a hobby. This is fun. I enjoy this. Right. We're going to start being forced to check out other sort of career fields that we can excel at. And usually when you find something that you're passionate about, you're just going to spend more time thinking about it, right?
How's it going? Welcome to Immersed into the Future. We are here with Matt Schrader today. Renji, you've seen him a number of times. Caleb, hey, remember him from before? Welcome back, dude.
Why did Matt get the last name intro?
Yeah.
Why didn't we get the last name intro?
Because he's brand new. No one knows who he is.
Yeah. All right, that's fair.
He's not even on our website. We're not sure if he's on a payroll.
But I'm here. I showed up.
We are here today talking about remote work. And so our whole company is really based around remote work, around solo productivity and remote collaboration. COVID is what kicked us off and really made the company explode, which you can touch on if you'd like to. But what I've come to understand now, being a year and a half into this COVID world and still kind of recovering from it, or what it looks like to go back into the office, this hybrid approach. You're hearing all these different terms being thrown around. And I'm hearing positives and I'm hearing negatives about it. I'm hearing a lot of positives. I'm hearing good things saying, oh, my wife and I get to travel more. And we're able to go out and work remotely from a coffee shop out in Peru. And this is awesome. Like, as long as I get my work done and on time, I have the autonomy and freedom to be able to do this. I'm hearing the negative side of things as well of remote work, saying, I feel more isolated now. I have less people conversation. I don't know what's going on in my coworkers' lives. There's only so much you can get to learn off of paragraphs of text. We're faced now with these two realities on the same topic. Two different perspectives on the same topic. Now, obviously, not every single company is going through this exact thing, but there are different, remember, not organizations, they're people, and the people are experiencing these same things. So now we're faced with that as a company, as a virtual reality company who's really, I'll say it this way, we kind of thrive off of remote work. We thrive off of people not being in the office. From a remote collaboration, you can still be in the office and still have the solo productivity, which Immersed does very well. But from a remote collaboration, that's kind of a lot of our bread and butter as well. How are we responding to this, and how are we thinking through these things and having answers to those types of perspectives?
Well, I could even just talk on the the co-location piece, meaning if you have the example where there are 3 people physically in the office and then 4 people working out of their own individual homes, but they have a 7-person meeting that's coming up. How do you get all 7 into the same space? That is something that we will be thinking about, right? That's something that we want to actively, proactively work on. Some companies will have all 7 just work from home. Some companies will require all 7 in the office, and some companies will be like, 3 could be in the office, 4 could be at home.
Right,
give
which
people
is happening
flexibility.
now.
And that hybrid approach. And so being able to offer an experience where we're considering all of those cases and enabling all of them to have that uniform experience, that co-location is something that we are working on. So all that to say, I don't think it really matters whether or not someone's working at home or remote work is on the rise or not. I think that regardless of that, like, though COVID was a catalyst for getting people outside of their the status quo of driving to the office, commuting and not using technology for the sake of increased productivity. COVID was helpful for that, but the way that things are heading towards, that was inevitable regardless of COVID. It's just COVID's now making that happen faster.
Right.
So.
Yeah, I think there's a measure of like humility that all companies need to walk through when trying to figure this out for themselves, because it's obvious, but like none of us have ever been through a global pandemic before.
Right. Don't know
and
what
so
this looks like.
Even though I think Renji's right that the world was already moving that way, a much more remote, collaborative, and even individualistic work culture in general, I mean, COVID was just 0 to 100 for that trend that was already happening. But I think like you listen to stuff, you hear these conferences, podcasts, whatever, and people kind of come out of like this attitude of, you know, we've cracked the case on like remote work and like how to like care for everybody. And
Zoom
it's
culture.
Like, yeah, exactly. And it's like,
Right.
I think there's just a measure of like, we've never done this before. We're learning. And I think we need to iterate, adapt from the learnings that are happening not just say we have the perfect model built out. So I would even just say starting from a posture of humility of what's best for our team is almost like the starting point.
Yep.
Do you have any strong thoughts on that, on how people, or what you've noticed in your observation, and certainly with your background as well, on how people are responding with this kind of feeling of isolation, or I'm having less human contact, so I feel worse about my day-to-day or my own life? Do you have any comments on that or perspectives?
Well, I mean, I think the obvious answer is that in a lot of ways, COVID in general is having a lot of negative impacts on people's overall emotional,
mood, and
relational well-being, those types of things. It's easy to sit here, listen to this conversation and people just go, this is stupid. I don't even care because I'm an introvert and I love working by myself.
Yeah.
This is heaven.
Right.
Yeah.
Those situations do exist. That's, there are people, I think this has been their dream in that way, in that regard. I think though, in general, data has been very clear that like in general, people's just overall well-being and their overall strength, resilience, and all these types of things. COVID has tested our country specifically, the world in general, but our country's resilience like nothing else. I mean, like if you just had the thought right now, told you like our country's about to go into another complete shutdown, your whole brain and mind just is like,
Yeah.
I quit, I'm done,
Yeah.
I give up, I can't do it. It's like, I feel like we're all in some way, form, or fashion teetering on this line of like, not empty, but like there's not maybe as much to give as we've had in the past. So there's a recovery aspect to it for sure. But I think at a very high level, we're now needing to take more into account people's holistic well-being than just simply, do you like your job? Do you just simply like what you do 9 to 5?
Yeah, so that kind of begs the question. So we talk about this in the startup world a lot, is as opposed to working a work-life balance approach, we take more of an approach that is work-life integration.
Or work-life harmony as well.
Or work-life harmony. And so, the traditional, 8 to 5, 9 to 5 job in corporate America is work-life balance. It's like, hey, I go to work and then I cut it off, I compartmentalize it, and then I go do the things I want to do. In the startup world, where we tend to put in more hours than a traditional 8 to 5 type job, we adopt more of the work-life harmony, work-life integration model, where it's like, yeah, if we need to work out in the middle of the day, we go do that, but I'm also not cutting my work off right at 5 p.m. that same day. Like, we're working more harmoniously to get the things done that we need to get done. I think in a startup world, we kind of don't have as much of a choice. Like, we need to adopt that.
Right.
But for most of the rest of, the working culture, you can have the option. And it seems like the more we trend towards this hybrid workforce solution, maybe that makes more sense to adopt the work integration, work harmonious model, as opposed to just the standard, clock in 8 to 5, I'm done, compartmentalize it, move on. That's my work-life balance. Yeah. And so I think we're asking a new question for the first time in a while for the greater work culture, not just in America, but perhaps in the rest of the world, of like, okay, if we're going to adopt this hybrid model, what is that actually going to look like? Like, there's got to be gives and takes. And I think to Matt's point earlier is, even going into the office, there's health aspects we have to be made aware of. And if you're working permanently from home, there's going to be health aspects you need to be made aware of. I think we all experienced that in the beginning of COVID, where, exercise naturally fell. Human interaction naturally fell.
Right.
And we kind of didn't know how to work through it. You figured it out, and you kind of, made best of how you knew how in that moment.
Download a few apps.
Download a few apps, whatever you need to do. And so I think we're figuring it out. I don't think we have it figured out, but I think we might be transitioning from just this work-life balance to work-life integration model.
That's scary.
I think the reason why that's going to be inevitable, and almost like COVID is somewhat of a forcing function towards that model, because as more and more people work from home, companies are forced to put infrastructure in place to get them to still collaborate and connect and all of that, right? You still have to be part of civilization, right? Whether or not you're physically there or not. So we need to build technological infrastructure to make sure that happens. But what that also now enables is now companies have access to global talent. So now you are not just competing with who's in your city. You're competing with who's around the world. How do you do that? You need to be one of the best in your craft worldwide, not just locally, right? So And the reason why that's important is because if other people are out beating you at what you traditionally did for a job, you're not going to have a job. And so what that tends to, I guess, start pushing people towards is, well, I don't really like what I've been doing for a living for so long. Why don't I start like actually looking into the things I actually enjoy, and maybe I'll actually get good at it. And at that point, you start thinking about more like, oh wow, work doesn't feel like a burden anymore. Now this work-life integration makes sense because work is a hobby. This is fun. I enjoy this. Right. It's like there are people who are Twitch streamers playing video games. It's like people think, oh, that's traditional. Oh, of course, that's fun. But it's like now it's a career for some people. Right. Or even like when it comes to us being able to build the future of work, where we put on a pair of glasses in the future and teleport to the office, that is mind-blowing stuff. And for us, the reason why we think about it in our free time is because it's so exciting. It's so it is a hobby.
I enjoy thinking about it.
Yeah.
The ideas of it all.
Exactly. And the more that our world starts having more and more access to global talent, and we're starting to have to compete with other people who are in our space, we're going to start being forced to check out other sort of career fields that we can excel at. And usually when you find something that you're passionate about, you're just going to spend more time thinking about it, right?
Yeah.
Like LeBron James wouldn't be so great at basketball if he didn't enjoy it, because obviously he was
6'8".
Yeah, or 6'8". We'll say Kyrie
265.
Irving. We'll say Kyrie Irving, all right? 6'3" or whatever he is, 6'2",
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
But the point is, like, the more and more people are being challenged to start questioning, oh wait, was I supposed to be doing this for a living? Like, was my life supposed to be just my 9 to 5? I have this burden for getting a paycheck, and then I live my real life after 5 p.m. It just doesn't have to stay that way. And as things progress over time, I think that people they're going to have to figure out, how do I work, have a career that I really enjoy, and that comes down to what am I good at, what do I enjoy? You find overlap, you become some of the best in the world in those things. All that to say, I think that all of this was inevitable. Unfortunately, we kind of had a lack of technological advancement in the past several decades that prevented a lot of this thing, like a lot of flexibility, people being able to do whatever they wanted for work. And now that COVID is a forcing function for that, people like Immersed are building the infrastructure to make this possible. So it's a really exciting future, but it's also a little bit scary for those who kind of don't want to put in the work or kind of don't want to adapt.
Or don't know how to.
Yeah.
Really the biggest thing. I think the two things you've pointed out is that, yes, we were behind from a technological standpoint, where now we're having to create things in the middle of having to need them, right? It's not, oh, this is going to be used 5 years from now. It's like, I need to build this right now,
Right
so
now.
it's used right now. So from a technological standpoint, yes, the advancement of that. But from the other side of things is a cultural shift that's needing to be created in the moment as well, because this isn't this came too quickly, it almost feels like. And now I think people, it's been a year and a half, I'd imagine, I don't know what your guys' conversations with friends are like, I would imagine the cultures of certain hybrid or complete remote work companies have figured out a certain type of culture. But that's the other thing too. I have a friend who's out in California, and she was literally hired to do how do you bring about culture from remote work, and she does like virtual happy hours, and people hate it. People hate her. They do try to do talent shows, like, all right, show me what you can do. Your little webcam is there, and your
pen around your finger, your thumb.
Yeah, and I get it, or this thing.
Oh yeah,
this is the talent. Gavin could show us. And I just think over time that's going to just be really boring, and people are going to, that's how you slowly start to hate what you do. Even if you enjoy the task or the mission that you're on, it's just, I don't like the way that I'm doing it or the method that I'm going about it. And so from a cultural standpoint, that's what I think is going to be the most deteriorating, not from a technological, we have no technology to support this, but it's really going to be from that. And so I don't know. So yes, we say, hey, that's where the world's going, or if that's where the world's already at. But the argument could be, but is that a good direction to go? Should we be doing that, or should we be trying to force things to go back to the way they were, if all in office?
And that's why I think, enter the metaverse, right? Video conferencing and chat cannot be the future of remote work. That cannot be how we are part of civilization moving forward, because it's so impersonal, and because if I want to be part of a talent show, all I can show is what I can do with my hands. Like, you want to build somewhat of a metaverse so that we could put something on and actually feel like we're actually there with people.
Right.
I think at a very high level, there's nothing that can replace human-to-human interaction. However, that's not always feasible or possible. So what's the next best alternative? And that's what we're talking about. So even as we create Immersed, we're not trying to replace human-to-human interaction. I don't think any of us believe that. We are trying to supplement where maybe that lacks or that's not a possibility. And as we become more of a global workforce, even here at Immersed, we have people hired overseas that we cannot meet in person, we can at least look to alternative ideas, hopefully Immersed being the primary one for adoption, of like being able to feel like you're being intimate with people as much as possible, because that's where bond and connection and trust is developed. And if you don't have those things, it can be really hard to build and develop the best product possible.
Yeah.
So.
That's better said too. I would think you're right. I was taking to the extreme of just saying my future of work, remote work, means that everyone's not going to leave their house. And that's not the case. You're right. I understand that. This is, if you can't get this, well, what is the next best thing?
Yep.
And I would say, man, video conferencing has just gotten, I don't even want to dabble in that anymore. I've just gotten so tired of stuff like that. So something like it's the metaverse or into sitting or on the same conference room virtually would work too. That's a better way of looking at it.
Well, even like how Renji, you brought this up a second ago. I think about this like when you say, as employers, we now have like global access to talent, to employees. Necessarily the opposite is true though too. Employees now have options globally of employers.
That's good. That's a good point.
So what that means on a very practical level is if I have endless amounts of options of places that I could apply or go work, what I'm now basing and judging all of these different companies on actually becomes a lot more options and a lot more things of, it's not just simply is it a 5-minute commute anymore, and does the pay hit what I want it to hit? Those things might still be at play to a degree, but as we've seen, like from the pandemic, from this kind of continued remote world that we're entering into, I strongly believe that what's going to be a byproduct of this continued globalized workforce is the opportunity for people to feel like a means to an end will go up as relationships go down because of distance. And if you look at what happens with like turnover a lot in companies, so Gallup, probably one of the most well-known research companies when it comes to like employee engagement, will tell you.
I get emails from them.
Yeah. Gallup will tell you that managers, leaders make up 70% of the variance in a team's overall engagement at their work. That's a lot of weight and responsibility, meaning
they're the ones who initiate the most. And so if they're not the ones initiating, that means people aren't affected well by that.
Right.
Not taking it upon themselves.
Meaning managers and leaders really, for just like plain English practical purposes, make up 70% of whether you want to stay or leave.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
How overall, how connected you feel, how valued you feel, how coached you feel, how supported you feel, what level of clarity is being given to your role and to your opportunity. And so when you just think about this remote world, this remote culture that's being created globally, it's so easy to just find somebody across the world who can just simply do a task, just do a job. That's just what we need done.
Right.
But if I'm now being given the opportunity for options, it's like, well, what if I want to be a part of something bigger than just accomplishing your to-do list? What if I want to be a part of a mission? And what if I want to actually feel like when I show up to work, somebody knows my name and like actually cares about something that I did over the weekend or whatever. And so I'm just lifting up, as the world is getting more complex, and this is not necessarily fun for leaders to think, I think actually even more and more weight is getting put on leadership to do this well. It's not necessarily getting easier to be a leader.
So can I ask, if we were talking about work-life harmony, if that's the transition that we're going to, and also taking in light what you just said, where it's like more becoming of management to make sure that their team is like taken care of from a mental aspect, maybe with this new wave of movement simultaneously while moving towards work-life integration or work-life harmony, maybe there's less responsibility upon the company to provide like wellness and like mental wellness for their employees, where it's like almost like corporate. And I come from the tech world, so Google, Facebook, Indeed, they give you the best perks possible. They want to do everything they can to make you happy in the workforce, but maybe they've taken on too much. Like, hey, like, you go back to the 60s, it's like, hey, you come here to work and that's it. You go get your happiness, your well-being elsewhere. And it's almost like corporate America has taken on too much responsibility for their employees. And maybe like as we move forward toward this work from home culture, it's upon you to like go outside the bounds of work to make sure you're being taken care of, essentially, and it's not just upon your employer. So I commend employers for wanting to do everything they can for their employees. That's great, but maybe that's not healthy. Maybe that's actually a bad thing, because
Too much hand-holding?
Not too much hand holding.
Yeah.
Now you have employees expecting things from their employers that quite frankly aren't fair. Like you have managers who maybe have, you know, a team of 10, 20, 30 people, like they're just trying to do their job, you know, let alone take care of all these people mentally. So maybe perhaps a byproduct of moving towards work-life integration. It sounds like kind of opposite of what.
Yeah, I mean, I could
integration
definitely
is,
see consumerism increasing, but I feel like it's just things will become more and more extreme. Meaning, either you get so pushed so far the end of consumerism where employers are like, you know, any of the tech giants are like, you can eat, sleep, and you know, birth children here. Like, have your children at our campus's hospital.
Behind that door. Don't
and like, and your children grow up on the campus. Like, I don't know, but
Yeah.
I guess I'm saying there's that level. But then you also get some employees who are just like, man, there's something that's just not fulfilling here, right? I'm not equipped, or I'm not given as much ownership, or I'm not as empowered as I want to be. So they kind of leave that to go start their own tech giant or whatever, right? And so I don't know that necessarily that things will necessarily like go one end or not. I think that we're just going to continue having a little bit of a cycle of a little bit of each, right? It might be a little bit of shuffling. That's how things have been for a while. I mean, a lot of people are having to become a lot more entrepreneurial based on necessity, right? So meaning, say for example, it gets to the point where because employers have access to global talent, now they ask you, in order for us to efficiently interview 5 million people for this role, we have to now rank you based on skills. So go take this test. We'll place you in the rankings. If you're in the top 5%, we'll hire you. If not, well, what choice do you have?
Yeah,
you have to
gotten more
then go.
competitive
If it gets
that way.
if it gets that electronic or that digitized, like, what choice do you have but to figure out how to make revenue for your family?
Right, and that entrepreneurship, like you're saying.
Yeah.
So what Caleb was saying earlier, I don't know if you had any thoughts on that specifically. If I'm hearing you correctly, you were saying that, hey, let's not put so much, that stat of 70% of why I want to work here is dependent on how my leader treats me or what kind of culture they're providing. But you're saying, yes, that might be a true stat, but let's not put all of our eggs into that basket saying, hey, I'm just here so that make sure that you take care of my needs, but rather I have to take ownership of it as well, which people I think do. I don't want to make it sound like, oh, if someone's listening going, oh, you're right, I do have to take ownership of my own life, but they can't be expecting so much from their employer. Is that kind of what you were saying?
Yeah, and maybe that's me just coming from the tech background, which isn't probably normal for most people out there who, you know, the tech industry is only a part of, you know, the entire workforce.
Sure.
But yeah, I think the hope would be like if we're adopting this work-life integration model, like it provides space for you to go do healthy things outside of work and then maybe just come back to work later, like that same day type of thing.
And I think the reason why that can sound taboo is because people have such a negative connotation of work being a burden, being things they hate.
I'm just here just to get my
It's
paycheck.
just a means to get my paycheck so that I can invest in real estate.
Right, that doesn't owe me anything else.
And maybe your perception towards work changes with like this adoption model. Now, I would probably expect a lot of pushback on this. Like, if you've never adopted this model, you would think, no way. Like, because most people have a negative perception towards work. It's just somewhere I go to collect a paycheck. And as long as you have that mentality, you're only gonna want the former, which is work-life compartmentalization and not integration.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, if you look at again, to go back to Gallup, I don't disagree with what Caleb's saying. What I am lifting up is like if you look at what Gallup's really pouring a lot of their energy into right now, it's actually holistic employee well-being right now. So it's job, it's emotional,
Mental.
Financial, mental,
Spiritual.
all of these things. Maybe if that
Oh,
works
maybe.
for
Sense.
if that works for your group.
For your spirit.
However, though, what they say is, while you need to grow in all 5 of these dimensions simultaneously, what kind of is the foundation and weight to all of that is your overall job satisfaction, career kind of piece to it. So if you look at a couple years ago, Facebook teamed up with Harvard Business Review and did an article, and it was basically just like, what are the top 3, they like stripped it down to like, what are the top 3 things employees want out of their career, out of their job these days? And it came down to 3 C's: career, cause, and community. So career being like, I want an opportunity to actually kind of like keep growing, to keep advancing, to keep developing my skills, to actually keep maybe even in leadership or management and these things. I just want movement. I want growth.
Right. Progression.
Progression, right? Community. Like, I want to actually belong somewhere. I want to actually like have friends.
Be on a softball team.
Yeah. But there's variance to it, right? It's not this attitude of like, you've got to be a best friend with every single person that you work with.
Sure.
And then the last one of cause, right? So I got to actually believe in what we're doing. To have this holistic level of deep engagement with what I'm doing requires a number of these different things happening, and particularly to this thing of cause, of when you are talking about loving what you do. All of us who are on the team right now deeply care about what we're doing. Mm-hmm. We deeply care about this product. But more than that, we deeply care about like the problems we're trying to solve, the things we're actually trying to help create in people's lives. And then kind of from that place, you then kind of start to look at some of these other dimensions and aspects of like, how connected do we feel? Like, and then what level of like trust is there based upon that level of connection that happens? I heard somebody say one time, if you don't have conflict, you're probably not moving fast enough. And
Well, in that case, Caleb, I haven't even to talk to you. I'm sick of you, man.
We'll take it offline.
But I love that, because what that does is it doesn't remove one or the other. Oh, it's supposed to be just grind and go. And it's not the other of it's all supposed to just be fluffy, flowery relationships. It's if you have a worthy cause, if you have a worthy endeavor, you got to go, and you're going to bump shoulders. So then it's just that next question of like, with the remote world, with these different relationships, do we have the leadership and the foundation and the structure in place to be able to handle that conflict, that rubbing, and that tension that happens?
Yes. Speaking on those 3 C's, it sounds like the career and the cause are things that can still be accomplished pretty well with remote work, right? I can read the mission statement and know what the cause is, and hopefully I see it in action. Career, of course, there's always room to grow, depending on the role that I'm in. But community, I would imagine, is it's more difficult to actually cultivate a real community if you're working remotely. Have you guys noticed any creative ways that you've either seen or heard or been a part of that, man, even though I was working remotely, I still felt very engaged and very involved?
Well, I mean, the technology world has been learning a lot from the gaming world specifically. Not that they're mutually exclusive, but like before COVID, the gaming communities have always been extremely tight, right? So things like Discord, Twitch. Back in the day, before Xbox Live was a thing, we had Xbox Connect, which was just it was fan made. We
really?
hacked together LAN, but we piped it through the internet, so we LANed not locally but like internationally. And so we were able to create a fake version of Xbox Live until they made Xbox Live. Like, oh wait, people are doing this. Okay, let's make this a service.
Wow.
And so the point is, a lot of these gamers, or what people think are toys, are actually seeds of innovation. And so a lot of the world really does start taking notes from that area, right? So like Discord started off as just a gaming communication platform, and Slack started feature by feature copying a lot of stuff. And so because they realized, you said what?
Hashtags, I've seen
Jiffy,
those.
all these things, man. And so like the point is, long before COVID, there were ways for people to be intimate in relationship remotely. And so that being said, there's still a lot to kind of dig up and learn about, because there is the reality to Zoom fatigue as well, right?
Yeah.
That being said, like we don't necessarily really know more than we're doing a ton of experimentation around the metaverse and whatever else. Like, is there a way we can make this feel a little bit more like real life? But at the same time, like Facebook, Microsoft, Google, like everyone is pouring billions of dollars to figure this out. That being said, I'm hopeful that we can figure it out, but like Caleb was saying, I don't think it'll be something that'll replace in-person intimacy or in-person connection. It'll be very similar to what I think gamers did back in the day, which is, I have my gaming friends that they don't really overlap a ton with, like people who I play basketball with outside, but it's kind of two worlds I'm part of, or even just before that, oh, these are my work buddies and these are like kind of my church people or my neighbor people, my neighbor friends or whoever, right?
Yeah.
So
I like that. And I want to make sure we hang on that quote too of like, it's not supposed to replace it. Like, it's not thinking that that's inevitable. No. That's not where things are designed to go. They shouldn't be going there. Let's keep that in mind so it doesn't feel as scary.
Yep.
Right. It's just an alternative.
And not even just for the sake of not being scary, but also just like in reality, like I think that we are wired as creatures to be able to like one of the 5 languages is physical touch.
Right.
I'm sorry, but technology will never be able to have that warmth in that sort of way. I guess you
Right.
blow some GPU hot air at something and like,
No, still wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
I'll know. Somehow I'll know. That's not real. Any of the creative things that you've seen, you've mentioned Discord and Slack, that helps me be able to have a community like, I recognize that the same people are responding to me on Slack or Discord. Like, I feel for my friend, I referenced her earlier, who's responsible for trying to create culture in a remote team. And she has the virtual happy hours. Like, I laughed at it. I was like, oh man, I would never do that. But if I was tasked with doing that, I wouldn't know what else to do. Like, how else? I understand the talent shows. I understand, like, you're just trying to, maybe I'll mail you something and then we can all talk about, how else would you be able to do that, though? Have you guys seen anything else?
How big is her company?
I was small, probably 25, 30 people.
Has she looked into getting Oculus headsets and downloading Immersed?
You know what? I'll send her this link.
I had to give it a
sales
plug.
guy
Hey,
just keeps pointing
download
at you.
Aaron's
Thanks,
friend.
Gavin.
Download Immersed. You can go work in
It's
a
like multi-level
co-working
marketing.
coffee shop.
Well, are there experiences that you've had remotely that were really enjoyable and really exciting?
That's
and
a good question.
Yeah, because I could think of like a couple.
Wait. Remotely so it has, when you say remotely, everything that's done like on my laptop or something that's been enjoyable?
Yep. I can give an example. So at least for me, for example, like when COVID first hit, our community group, like we just for church, we did, Jackbox TV, that game thing you do on Apple TV or whatever. We did that remotely and it was still fun. And so I was like, that's so weird. Why was that still fun? It was kind of odd. And then the only other thing I could think of back in the day was also being able to like strategize or whatever with Halo buddies and stuff like that, right? Even though I've never met them in person, it was just like, wow, we are on the same wavelength. If somehow we organically found each other and we decided to be on the same team and just be able to like wreck people in Halo, right? And so
I would always get wrecked in Halo. Man, I hate this. I gotta find a new way.
you gotta find your clique.
I would say, to answer your question, though, I thought of, I guess, any type of celebrity.
Cameo.
But think of it just this way. I've heard stories where celebrities are like, people treat me so disrespectfully on the street when they run into me because they feel like they know me. And like, I have no idea who they are, and they expect me, like Ryan Reynolds is like, they expect like the Deadpool version of me every time because they know me virtually. And so I'm thinking of like even influencers. Like the reason why people watch vlogs of like just their outfits or just like what they did that day is because they feel like they're connected with them. And to me, it's not my cup of tea. I don't care. I go to TJ Maxx. But I can see how there's like, I'm following along on this person's path, this person's journey, because I like their personality. I like how they do things and the way that they're expressing. I relate to some certain stuff, or that's how it is with music. I really relate to this, so I'm going to keep following that artist. So I would say that's like my remote way of like enjoying someone else's presence. But that's the best I got.
Anyone that you knew in person, like in real life, and then when it had to go remote, you were able to still do something and enjoy it together?
Oh, that's a good question. I feel bad because I actually, I had a bunch of close friends in college, and now we don't talk that much anymore because we're remotely.
I see.
And so they're off starting their lives, and I get to see from afar, but it's not like, it certainly isn't how it was.
Right. Proximity plays a role.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's everything, but it plays a role.
Yeah.
And that was the thing that came to my mind when you were talking about your community group and how you did the TV thing. I think for your friend or just other managers listening to this or like trying to navigate this in general, there is that whole thing though of like, there's community and there's connection on the one hand. When we were an in-person team before, then COVID happened and now we've had to adapt. In addition to, there's the reality of some teams have always only ever been remote. Some people get hired across the country. They've never been in person. I mean, we know what it was like because we all work here in the Austin office, but we know what it was like when we had some of our remote team physically come into the office and engage with them face to face for the first time. How engaging it was, how fun it was. But to your point, I think there's also a level of quality of relationship that comes
Yeah.
into this conversation
Totally.
too. What expectation are we bringing to the table of the depth, the quality of connection that we're also going to make here?
That's
so
my argument for long distance dating, by the way.
Oh my gosh. Well, I mean, there's something that's
he had to go
but what's
there.
the quality of it? No,
well, there's also a level of like I'm looking at the
Sorry
common
for
thread.
interrupting.
I'm looking through the common thread of all these things. The common thread seems to be a level of commitment, right? Meaning like when it came to the community group playing Jackbox TV, like we were committed to one another. When it came to my Halo team, we were committed to winning or like working together. When it comes to your actual work team and your or even a long distance relationship, the common thread I see is because people are committing to one another.
Yeah.
It's almost as if they're bearing through the pain it is not to be actually be in person, but it can be almost so enjoyable to the point where it does feel like you're still enjoying each other's time, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
This will be fun. What is the state of the culture 10 plus years from now if we adopt a full hybrid or full work from home model? What is the state of the work culture?
Well, you famously said, Renji, that you believe that cities will become almost like this decentralized way of thinking. It's not going to be as expensive to have to live downtown because that's where I work is downtown. I have a 20-minute commute if I'm living outside the suburbs. It's going to spread out. The epicenters of where work gets done is going to spread out.
People are probably going to value landscapes more, right? Like I want to live on the edge of a plateau, like in front of the ocean in California or something, right? But
especially with Starlink.
yeah, well, yeah,
Or just global internet.
Boat in the middle of the ocean.
It's such an interesting timing of everything.
It's exciting,
Or
too.
everyone's going to be working remotely. And it's like, well, that'd be nice, but how am I actually able going to do that? Well, then you provide Starlink with it. Okay. So
Yeah.
that's going to be, it's actually more.
Is
valid
it
that way.
healthier? 10 plus years.
Are you saying that as of right now or how it was unhealthy at one
Yeah,
time?
well, I think we're riding the coattails of having the benefit of most of everybody. We're 18 months into the pandemic. Most companies are still operating from a team that has already been previously built
Right.
from being in person. We're riding the coattails of that privilege, essentially. A couple more years into this, or maybe not even that much longer, there's going to be teams that are purely developed and built 100% remote, and they've never had the opportunity to build rapport in person. So fast forward that model 10 years into the future, what does our health look like? What do our teams look like? How are we operating? Is it better or is it less? Or is it like, it's better in some areas and then worse in some others, and then it's just kind of like a net average?
It's a good question.
You know?
Maybe how it's been, I don't know, but maybe how it's been, like if we just think of the reverse of that, where I had my whole, because I spent so much time at work, all of my friends were at work, and my most of my community was at work, and then I had just like a little bit of my free time is where I had my friends. I think it might reverse of that, where like all of my life now is what I do day to day outside of my work, my job, but 10 years from now, if it's completely hybrid, I only kind of visit my friends at the office now, but it's not like living day-to-day life with them.
I just feel like things are more cyclical than we think that it is. Meaning, like, I think history repeats itself more often than we think it does. Partly because we only live in the generations that we live. We weren't here in the '60s or whatever, right? Like,
every generation's just a carbon copy of itself.
yeah. This is almost like an exaggeration of that. You've probably seen this before. Technology makes us antisocial. Oh wait, we were already doing this, right? Like, it was an issue that people were using their cell phones and not communicating on buses or whatever. But like, people were already doing that with newspapers already. It's just a different medium, right?
Yeah, I guess. No. It's multifaceted.
Well, I think the way that extends in the future is if people want human contact, they're going to go find human contact. It's not like, because I now have glasses, I am never going to meet. Like, you're going to have, I think there are inherent wirings in us that are going to make us crave in-person contact. And so we're going to go to the gym, we're going to go to the store, we're going to go whatever, and like get that in-person contact as we need it, and still have in-person relationships. So 10 years from now, like, even if everyone's working from home, I still think it's going to be like, well, at the end of the day, say, for example, if I'm a teacher and I teach at an elementary school or something, and then my wife is a news reporter, we already didn't have overlap in our work stuff. And so now our work is going from me going to the elementary school to now my work being here, and then hers being her going to the news station or whatever, but instead of hers doing this.
Yeah.
So we already didn't have overlap. So it's not like, oh, now my world is at work and my world is my elementary school in VR. It's like, well, no, it's going to be pretty similar to how it is now. It's just technology makes it faster for us to be able to, all right, now I'm no longer there and now I'm here with my wife.
Yeah, that's a healthy way of looking at it.
I think it also is just one of those things where every technological advancement pushes the world, a lot of the times generally in a good direction, but it has sometimes unintended consequences, necessary things to have to learn and evolve and adapt to. And I think in general, we are a species that adapts and we figure out how to survive and we figure out how to move on. However, having said that, and even looking at this, it's not that I disagree with this. It's not that I think this is just like wrong or anything like that. I do think though, and especially as somebody who even before being a part of Immersed had spent about 3 years in high school emotional relational health world. I mean, it's just data. This isn't like my opinion. Data is teen suicides are in a really tough spot right now.
Yeah.
Just general population, emotional relational health suicide stuff is in a really hard spot. And so,
do they know the cause of that? Like, is it people only present their best images on Instagram and then my personal life's not like that? Or is it, they're just not in contact in general with people?
right.
That's a good question.
I think if you simplify this down to 1 or 2 reasons, you're probably oversimplifying it. And so I don't want to do that.
Okay.
I don't want to say what it emphatically is or isn't.
Mm-hmm.
However, I do think in my experience, having done some of this work for a number of years, been in real relationships with kids and actually processed some of these things, what necessarily happens when you start to pull back physically from people and you go to more of a remote or digital relationship, you lose a lot of the humanness of communication. So when I say something to you, Aaron, and your face kind of does this like that, or you kind of you slouch a little bit, I'm now having to read social cues, and that's making me now think something different now about how you just took that. Now you and I are in a position to where we're going to have to figure out whether we're going to deal with this or not. Are you going to say something? Are we going to actually kind of like work through certain things? And so I think, again, oversimplifying here, but I think to a degree, there's a lot of beauty in what's happening of us getting more remote, us having more opportunity. But the truth is, relationships are only strengthened by being in relationship with each other.
Yeah.
Like relationships are never static. You are always either growing closer together or further apart. And further apart doesn't mean conflict. It just means, to your point, like your friends. I just don't talk to them. I don't see them. I just, they're not in my life type of a thing. So I think what I'm saying is I do think that with this remote world, where we're going to be in the future, I'm not necessarily one of these like doom and gloom kind of people. I just think we actually have a deeper than COVID, deeper than remote world factor at play here that we have to keep thinking through about how do we actually have healthy relationship, communicate well, work through disagreements well. Leaders give effective and clear guidance and coaching on what you're supposed to do. And I actually think that's you could put COVID to the side. That's just an issue in general.
So check this out.
good,
I like the example you gave of like being able to read people's facial expressions and like, what are you guys' thoughts around like,
frick?
we moved to a world where facial tracking gets so strong to the point where it legit almost feels like they are actually there, right? So hold on.
Facebook's prototype, how do you pronounce that word? Avatars.
Avatars no longer need face tracking cameras.
Photoreal.
So look at this. So
We'll edit that out.
yeah.
Oh, that says photoreal.
Photoreal. Yeah. So just seeing how you cannot distinguish like real life versus VR. Let me fast forward a little bit to some of these.
So where would this be used? Give me an idea of where this would be used.
In the metaverse, like in VR,
But
meaning
it says you doesn't need cameras, right? That's what the headline there says.
so these prototypes actually have cameras inside the headset that's tracking your face and stitching it together so that that the person receiving it on the other end sees this. They just see you, right? So here, let me show another example.
And this technology exists today.
I mean, this Facebook
prototypes.
prototypes on
That's
YouTube from 2 years ago. So look at this. Like it's that prototype right there is tracking his mouth, it's tracking his eyes, it's tracking everything, right? So now that I'd be able to read people's facial expressions, I mean, look how it's pretty accurate. Like,
What is she doing?
it's pretty strong. She's just like trying to test the bounds of the technology, right?
Weird, right?
They show
Quit
that.
testing.
So look, so they
Strange.
show that it has cameras on the inside. It shows that it's got cameras down at the bottom of it, so it can track your mouth.
And just for the sake of talking about it, Renji, tell me why this isn't possible today. Like, there's just no cameras on the inside of the headsets.
Not that it's not. You're talking about with the current headset that's
With the current
shipped?
headset.
Because the hardware's not there. It's not in place. With these prototypes, they wanted to obviously like there's a level of making a prototype and then actually shipping it, right? Like being able to create a manufactured version of it at scale, right? That's the price point is low. The economies of scale make sense.
I see.
All those types of things. So
I think this is huge.
yeah. So what does that world look like, right? So we're not avatars anymore. We're still ourselves in a sense, We're connecting with real people. But now in this case, like technically it's virtual, right? Look how real that looks. Does that even look fake?
No.
It does not look fake. It looks real. It looks very real.
Good job, Aaron.
And so, so what does that world look like, and how does this potentially change you guys' perspective of moving more towards a more remote world?
Oh, it's so much better. It's a night and day difference.
only
I
helps.
think. Because honestly, that's
helps.
the biggest thing. Is whenever I'm in Immersed, let's say, and I'm talking with somebody, I'm just hearing the tonal inflections in their voice, or like the pace they're talking about, the different inflections that they're using, but I'm not able to see facial movements and exactly what you're saying, which is a whole massive chunk of the human interaction.
Yep.
Right.
And so this completely solves that.
Yep.
Completely solves it. I don't even know where there would be like a downfall of this.
That's what I'm
Maybe
saying.
just
So what are the drawbacks of not, like, what if, okay, here's the extreme mental exercise. If there is no longer human physical contact, right? But just this, all right? That's the extremes. Obviously, it's like, well, yeah, I mean, babies still need to be raised by their mothers, and the physical contact is important.
Yeah.
I get that. But what about when it comes to coworkers?
I think it's still important to be able to shake hands and hug.
And share a meal together?
And share and honestly share a meal
Absolutely,
together.
yeah.
Yeah, and you can do that virtually, but not not actually eat virtual food.
And also, to be honest, I just don't know. I don't know what the difference would be. I just never been in this world before. But I mean, what we're doing right now, none of us have touched each other today, or at this conversation.
Yeah.
So this could all have been done virtually.
Through this.
So I guess you're right. I think I'd prefer. I don't know. I've never done this before, but I think I'd prefer to do something like this. But I know that this is. I mean, this is coming, man. That's the other thing. That's always what I hang my hat on too. Is that you can talk about like what ifs or we shouldn't or whatever. This is on its way. This is coming, and so it's either embrace it and try to learn how to adapt from it, but don't shy away from it and just put your head in the sand.
Yeah,
So-
I feel like this is like a lame answer, but I think it's the simplest answer actually is we just don't know. And I think what's important though is to not look at this and still have that frustrated, pessimistic, kids and their technology, all these things. It's like,
Right.
who knows? Like
Yeah.
maybe in 10 years when this is ubiquitous and like avatars and all these things are just next level, like I look at this and I go, this is cool.
Yeah,
This is sweet.
it is, and it's cool. There's cool.
And by the way, there will be ways to mimic shaking hands and giving hugs with like haptic suits.
Yeah.
But even then, it's not going to be 100% of the way there. So
You can't have a virtual
Well,
relationship
like
completely.
you said, you
Right,
don't want to replace
right,
it. That's
right.
I hope that doesn't become the goal is completely replace it. It's just to either amplify it or create some type of middle
Flexibility,
ground to
right?
it.
Just like being able to say, for example, I just can't come in today to the office, right? Is there a way that I can make it so that there's not as many drawbacks to not being able to be in the office, right?
Right.
Because today, if we're not in the office, it's just not the same as us having a conversation on the phone versus in person, right?
I think, Renji, you mentioned this earlier, like humans are cyclical. There's like kind of nothing new under the sun. Like they're disguised as new concepts, but humans tend to move from extreme to extreme on kind of like this pendulum swing. And to me, it seems like this is the new extreme pendulum swing where we've been doing the 8 to 5 in office for so long. This is new, and it's proven that like not necessarily just VR, but the hybrid work from home model, but this included in that can provide more flexibility in my work schedule. So even though the 8 to 5 has a lot of good things, there's a lot of bad things with it that this can solve. Let's just fully swing the pendulum that way. And I look at cryptocurrency actually the same way, where it's like we have a currency system now that works, but it's plenty flawed. And so when we look at the flaws long enough, we start looking at something else that's shinier. And like the alternative is going to have flaws as well, similar to hybrid work remote, similar to cryptocurrency. It's not perfect, but it's going to fix a lot of things that's wrong with today. So human tendency is like, let's go that way. And we kind of operate in these pendulum swings, and we may not always see it or witness it because we only live, 60, 70, 80, 90 years on Earth.
Right.
Yeah.
But the world's been around a lot longer than that. And,
Yeah.
we tend to get caught up in our own heads of like, well, this is all I've seen. This must be the ultimate
Right.
truth. And that's not the case.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think we'll keep figuring out, keep reducing down what are the things that are essential and what are the things that you just can't replace. Like we talk about this in the office all the time, with where technology is today, without maybe something like this being everywhere. We talk about how much relationship strengthening and building happens actually from not even directly talking to each other, but watching you talk to someone else, watching you tell a joke, watching, like if all you ever knew was Aaron on a direct, I have a call with you, you would never know this guy's a complete goober, like all the other like parts of the day, and has a huge personality and all these types of things and has fun. And so it's that like, I think we're in this process of trying to figure out how do you push the boundaries of technology and keep stretching, but yet unfortunately some things will fall through the crack. And what we've got to learn is those things that fall through the crack, those were the really important pieces we've still got to hold on to and figure out a way to replicate that.
And fortunately, we still have access to airplanes and like still be able to like, even for example, the fact that half of our team is remote, even this is still not going to recreate the exact in-person experience, right? Even if we try to do co-location with this and recreate this, but with 25 people, it's still not going to be the same as us being able to go out to lunch together as a team. Right. So flying people in for quarterly retreats or things like that.
Have you guys met anybody who's opposed to the hybrid or work from home model? Because I don't think that I have. So I know it's come up on like LinkedIn posts and social media of like, there's companies that are definitely mandating their employees coming back. That's certainly a thing. In my circles, though, I don't think I know anybody that's like, yeah, that's the way we have to go back to.
I have someone that I know back from school down in Florida who's just like, man, this is just getting so boring. Like, I just can't be here anymore. I like having the separation of going from my house and mentally checking off that to say that's home, that's where my kids are, and going into the office. And when I'm done, I'm coming back. Now, like you're saying, that's kind of a traditional 8 to 5 way of thinking, but from a destination point.
Yeah.
8 to 5 at 6 p.m., my friend is still thinking about work. Right. So there's a difference there. But I know I hear that.
But would that person disagree with the hybrid model, even though they prefer it? Because I can see somebody being like, hey, I like going. I like going to the office too. We all go into the office. I personally prefer to go in the office. But I like the flexibility of working from home if I need to or if I have to. Would that same friend say the same thing about work from home model, or would they be like, everybody needs to be in the office?
Well, you've recognized the difference of here in the office. If there's like 4 people missing, you feel that. It feels different. And so I think that could be the same argument that my friend's making is like, yes, there's a hybrid approach to things, but I'd like for everyone to be in the office at a specific time. And if we're all out, then we're all out type thing, rather than just like, I come to an office that used to be vibrant and I'm trying to expect the same things from that type of office, but there's less people here, and so I'm not even getting it. I'd rather just not do it at all.
The question is that like an innate human nature need, which like it wasn't 200 years ago, because this wasn't a thing. Like, or for example, like my grandpa, who was a rubber tree farmer, work means go outside and like do stuff, and like they had other workers that would help and stuff, but maybe sometimes there were people there, maybe not, but the work needed to get done. So it's like they weren't necessarily even they weren't even having these conversations, right? So the fact that people make it a necessity of like for functioning as a human being seems a little extreme, because it's like this wasn't a thing 100 years ago, 200 years ago. So what makes you think that we've evolved in such a way where now that's a staple? Like,
well, I think it's because it's how it was. When I first got introduced to work, that's how it was. So you're right. If I'm comparing to 200 years ago, then yeah, of course, that's different. But I'm comparing to what happened 3 years ago. Like, that's different. I have a memory of a full office, and I want to go back to that memory rather than...
So we're talking about wants, not needs. Like, meaning it's not impossible for that individual to be productive. It's just they're unwilling to be productive unless these conditions are met. I think that's maybe a pride thing, or just like a preference thing, or just like maybe go to a company that, just like...
Yeah, I guess. But if it helps me perform better, maybe I guess I hear what you're saying. I guess it's not quite a need.
It wouldn't make you perform better 100 years ago if you existed 100 years ago.
Yeah.
So, I mean, maybe that's a nature versus nurture thing, but it's like, for me, I'm like...
maybe you're soft.
Yeah. Adapt. Hey, adapt or survival of the fittest.
No, I hear what you're saying.
Well, I think leaders just create a system and a process, and they stick to lots. It's easy to stick to what you know. It's easy to stick to what you're comfortable with. And so, pandemic aside, just this whole remote thing, it's just like, this is just uncomfortable for some people, and they would rather stick to what they know, or just feel uncomfortable trying something new in that way. And it's not bad. I think that's the part that's like, every job, every business, every industry is a little bit different, and I think there's different ways of doing things, and it's like, if it's just this universal, there's only one way to do it, that's probably where, things are getting off.
Yeah. Guys, thanks for listening. I appreciate it. I'm glad. Very good conversation. I like it because we're a company that promotes like remote work and solo productivity in that way, but yet we're also all in the office as well. So we're doing the hybrid approach ourselves. It's kind of this thing that we're actually rolling with. So we're literally living what we're talking about, practicing what we preach. And so it's good to have our own thoughts about it. So appreciate it. And thanks for being here.
Yeah, absolutely.